Oh.
That was a very strange experience.
Yeah, I've got to check into that because I don't know because it all of a sudden stopped. I think it was on the side. Sorry.
Yes, we're going to hear from Kathy Buffington, who's the Small Business Pulse Survey Director. And then when Kathy's done, we'll hear from Cassandra Logan, the Household Pulse Survey Director. So once again, Heidi will be checking the chat, so please ask questions in the chat, and we'll address them after the session. Thanks.
So, of course, I've just messed up my monitor. Let me see, what do I do? Can you see the
yep.
slides? Well, what did I do?
You're in presenter view. Okay. You're in presenter view rather than slideshow. So we can see your slide and your next slide.
Okay, how about, sorry. How about now?
Yep, fine.
Awesome. Sorry about that. So good morning. Thank you for having me. As I noted earlier when we were waiting to get on, the state data centers are, I think, my favorite talk to give because I know that the audience is full of experienced data users who have an interest in Census Bureau products. And so with that, I wanted to introduce myself as the acting director for the Small Business Pulse Survey. And I'm gonna kind of speed through these quickly because there's a lot of overlap in terms of the household, which you'll hear about next. So the Small Business Pulse Survey was conceived in kind of late March. We wanted to do something quickly to produce high-frequency data to try to get a handle on what was going on the business side with small businesses. We selected small businesses as our target population because they comprise about 60% of all businesses in the United States and about 40% of the jobs in the United States. So they're an important part of the economy. They're an important constituency in terms of groups of businesses that receive targeted federal program assistance. And they're also from a surveying point of view, we stuck to single location small businesses. It's a really kind of easy thing to do in terms of tabulating data and producing geographic detail. So our goal was to produce high frequency geographic and industry detail. We wanted to do a weekly survey. We've completed one phase that ran from late April to late June, and another phase that started up kind of the second week of August, and we're getting ready to wrap up the last 2 weeks. You'll see kind of the list of agencies that we've partnered with over the 2 phases to produce content that we think is relevant both for the American public and data users such as yourself, but also federal agencies who try to target programs to these businesses. So I mentioned that we used single location businesses as our target population. We did not include non-employer businesses, so that is we only included businesses that had between 1 and 499 employees and that had positive revenue. And we also needed to have an email address because back in March and April when we were conceiving of the survey, the National Processing Center in Jeffersonville, Indiana was closed, so there was no one to actually mail letters, which is typically how we do communicate with businesses on official letterhead with an official envelope and a signature. So we are an email-only contact strategy survey. We batch about 100,000 emails every Sunday and close out on the following Saturday. We're receiving about 20 to 25,000 responses each week. We split our sample of 1 million small businesses into sort of 9 slices. So that's, we mail about 100,000 per week. And these are representative when we use survey weights of about 5.6 million small businesses. So they are representative at the national level. We are able to link these to our extensive business data infrastructure so that we can kind of slim the survey down to only those important concepts that need to be asked every week. You don't need to know what state or city you're in or industry that you produce goods or services for. So our content is qualitative, that is, we don't collect numbers from businesses, which is another departure for the economic programs area. These are a series of questions that gauge both sort of overall how well businesses are doing and what their outlook for returning to normal is, but also some high-frequency questions designed around operational concepts such as employment and revenues, challenges that the business might face. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we were interested in if businesses were really pivoting to producing new goods or services, what share were switching to curbside and carryout, right, to kind of maintain a lifeline, and what kind of supply chain disruptions were going on. We also had questions on finance, so liquidity, loan and other payment defaults, and whether or not businesses had requested or received assistance, including some of the kind of high-profile federal programs, including PPP. In our second phase, we modified our content a little bit. In the interest of time, I'm going to quickly move on here, just to say that for Outlook, right, by the time August rolled around, some businesses had actually kind of returned to normal. That is, when we asked how long until you are going to return to normal, they could have the ability to check we've already returned to normal. Likewise, we added a category that the business was permanently closed. So I think I've covered most of this. I'll note that earlier I said we wanted to do high-frequency geographic and industry detailed data. We do produce weekly estimates at the national and state level, as well as for the 50 largest MSAs by population. We produce sector-level data, both at the national level and within states. And it's not listed here, but we also have 3-digit NAICS or subsector level data nationally as well. We also, it doesn't say it here, but we do produce estimates for Puerto Rico. And I just wanted to note that we do have the same target population for both phases. That is, if we use the same kind of 1 million businesses for the first phase and the second phase. So I've selected visualizations from what I think is like a really excellent front end for the Small Business Pulse Survey data. I didn't have anything to do with it, so I feel like I can talk about how much I love it. And I've used each of sort of the topics of the survey to demonstrate one of the visualizations. So the website for the survey has a map, and it allows you to look through the weekly data by question and by answer. So this is the question of, well, this is a mixed match between overall effect and expectation. So I'm going to roll with the data that you see. This is not the overall effect, but this is when do you expect to return to normal. And the answer selected is more than 6 months. And you'll note that the states, as well as Puerto Rico, those states that have the highest share of businesses reporting more than 6 months include Maine and Rhode Island. And the states that, the state at least that has the lowest share of businesses reporting more than 6 months looks to be like North Dakota, but the Dakotas generally. So the map gives you a quick view of the geographic variation in the data. Here I've selected we have a bar chart tool that allows you to drill down and see all of the answers to a particular question for a given survey week, and you're able to compare states, MSAs, or sectors within this tool. So here I'm demonstrating or showing Oregon and Washington State for the question about what kind of delays or difficulties has the business had in the last week. So what you'll note is that Oregon has had a larger share of supplier delays in the red bar than the national average. You can sort of sum together the domestic and the foreign suppliers if you'd like to get an overall sense of supplier delays and their impact on small businesses. They have a higher than national average share of businesses reporting difficulty locating alternate suppliers, a higher than national share reporting that they have production delays at the business, as well as delays in delivery or shipping to customers. And then the little last in there where Oregon is red, you'll see that fewer than the national average in terms of percentages, businesses in Oregon report none of the above. Right? So you may think that businesses in Oregon perhaps are facing a more challenging environment in terms of supply chain. Again, it's the bar chart, that has drill down capabilities, and this is a finance question. It's whether or not you've received any assistance. You'll note that businesses in both Oregon and Washington State received a little bit less than the national average in terms of receiving the Paycheck Protection Program Fund. Likewise, Oregon received less economic injury and disaster loans or SBA loan forgiveness than the national average. And it looks like, although the numbers are very low, businesses in Oregon are a little bit more likely to take advantage of federal sick leave tax credits and sick and family leave tax credits. Sorry. The Small Business Survey asks about future needs, and one of the things that I'd like to note here is that we do ask small businesses if they are planning on closing within the next 6 months, and you'll note that the national average, I think, is around 5%, in Oregon has a slightly higher than national average on planning on permanently closing within the next 6 months. You'll note that supply chain, again, factors largely in for businesses in Oregon, as well as developing online sales and obtaining financial assistance. So one of the things that we've become aware of with the Small Business Pulse Survey is that a lot of the variation that we see being driven, or we see across states, like we saw on the map earlier, is really being driven by the variation in industry within those states. That is, industry composition within the state seems to be driving a lot of the variation response. And so kind of in plain language, what does this mean? Why is Maine so dark red, like in the last few weeks? Well, because summer ended and Maine is largely a tourism-based economy, right? Or it has a large share of small businesses in tourism-related industries. And when school started and the temperatures stopped dropping, I think people stopped going to Maine. If you kind of page through the Census Bureau's website for the Small Business Pulse Survey, you'll note that Hawaii is also consistently, their small businesses, which are highly skewed towards tourism-related industries, are also more likely than the national average to report adverse outcomes across many of the questions that we ask. So this is all a lead up to show you a bar chart that is not in the tool, but is a really nice illustration of the variation in the data by sector. And so you'll see that the Small Business Pulse Survey covers all non-farm sectors in the United States economy, all non-public and non-farm sectors. And the yellow bars, summed together, sort of represent the businesses that have either had no effect or have the pandemic has had no effect on them, or they've already returned to normal. The blue bars represent some amount of time during which the business believes they will return to normal. And then the pink and the red summed together represent the businesses, the share of businesses in those sectors that will never believe they'll never return to normal or they've already closed. And I did hear the question on the last talk earlier about colorblindness, and so I do apologize if this is a problem for anyone in the audience. So I'll just say that the bottom two bars are the yellow ones, the middle four are the blue, and the top two are the red and pink. So what you'll see is that there's a huge amount of variation in the bottom two bars, or the yellow and gold bars, relative to the blue. That's a big setup. To show you that here you'll see these are the largest 10 states in the United States by population size. And you'll note that the variation in terms of sort of the amount of that the yellow bars or the bottom two bars differ across the states is much less, and I'm going to toggle back, than across sector. That is, we can say that the experiences across sectors, right, are much more varying than those across states. And so when you see a state with a particularly bad outcome, it's likely due to this sectoral composition within that state. And I'll just draw your attention to sort of 61 through 72 over on the right-hand side of this chart. 61 is, I'm going to get this wrong now, educational services, and 62 is healthcare services. 71 is arts and recreation services, and 72 is food and accommodation services. And so you see those services in which small businesses operate and have to have interaction, right, direct interaction with their customers, are much less likely to respond that there's been no effect or they've returned to normal. In the 50s, these are, I call them desk jobs, but they're not all desk jobs, but they are sort of sectors in which there's a high degree of the ability to use a computer to intermediate the transaction, right, with your customers. So finance, real estate, insurance fall in the 50s. And so we just see that it's just easier for those businesses to return to normal, right? And likewise, the top two bars of the chart, of the bar chart, right, the sectors, sector 72, food and accommodation, right, is the hardest hit in terms of never returning to normal or closing. In the interest of time, I want to leave a few minutes for questions. I'll just note that all of the data for the Small Business Pulse Survey is available for download. There's extensive documentation with questionnaires and codebooks and README files, as well as some information on how we construct some estimates. And I think we can make the URL available outside of the talk. I'm going to stop sharing. And I do have another call I have to hop off on, but I am here for a few more minutes if anybody has questions.
So, Kathy, we don't have anything in the chat yet, but I know I fielded this to you yesterday. If you just want to talk a minute about what's going to happen for phase 3 and beyond with the survey.
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. So we do believe that the effect of the pandemic on small businesses is ongoing. And so the Census Bureau does have a desire to continue to collect data from small businesses. And so we have a phase 3 planned. We hope to begin it in November, but it is pending approval by the Office of Management and Budget.
Thank you. And that's it for the questions, but I'll let everybody know in the chat that if you do think of anything for Kathy, that you can put it in the chat and we will pass it along to her to get answered.
That's right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Kathy. Cassandra, you're all set to start sharing.
Sorry, I was muted. Is it sharing?
Yes.
Okay.
And we can hear you.
Okay. I kept hitting the mute button too many times. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Cassandra Logan. I am the survey director for the Household Pulse Survey, and I will be giving you an overview of the survey as well as some state level and overall findings from what we've collected so far. So due to the coronavirus pandemic, there is a need for real-time data on the social and economic impacts of the pandemic. And so the Census Bureau sought to meet that need by quickly and efficiently deploying the Household Pulse Survey. So similar to the Small Business Pulse Survey, we started around the same time. The survey went from fruition to implementation in like a month's time. Development to implementation in like a month's time. So development began on March 23rd, and we were in the field for phase 1 by April 23rd. And phase 1 ran through July 21st. And we took a break as we reconfigured the questionnaire some and our data products, and began phase 2 on August 19th, which will run currently until October 26th. And it's experimental rapid response high frequency survey. And for phase 1, we worked with a number of partners. We worked with Bureau of Labor Statistics, the National Center for Health Statistics, Department of Housing and Urban Development, the National Center for Education Statistics, and the USDA Economic Research Service. And we also worked very closely with the Office of Management and Budget. For phase 2, we continued with our initial partners and added 2 additional agencies, the Bureau of Transportation Statistics and the Social Security Administration. So we were able to leverage existing Census Bureau infrastructure and data sources in order to design and implement the survey. So we're able to use Qualtrics as our platform, which has previously been used more in research and experimental projects, but we were able to use Qualtrics. Similarly, or the same as the Small Business Pulse survey, the National Processing Center was shut down, so we couldn't send out letters. Of course, we couldn't send anyone out face-to-face to conduct interviews or even utilize our telephone centers to conduct telephone interviews. So what we did was we emailed and texted, sent text message invitations to our sample to take the survey online.
Kathy, or Cassandra, I'm sorry, your slides aren't changing.
Oh, but they're changing on my screen. Huh.
They're not here.
All right, let me escape. Let me, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to share my screen instead of the application. Maybe I'm doing something.
It's a new platform that we're working off of, so please, people, bear with us a minute. These little quirks we have to work out.
It won't allow me to do that. Meeting in progress. Maybe I was doing something. Let me try this button. So what do you see now?
We're seeing the just as if you were getting ready to correct something on your slide. It's not a full screen.
What's this? Try again. Now what do you see?
The same thing. Try changing a slide from there.
I'm changing. Nothing's happening.
No. All right, let me do this. I'm going to take the resume. Okay, now I can go share screen. Come on. Why are you not letting me share now? Yeah, I am. Okay?
Okay.
Let's go.
Okay. So just in sum on this one, due to restrictions of the coronavirus pandemic, we couldn't mail out letters for invitations. We couldn't send people out to conduct face-to-face interviews, nor do we have staff in telephone centers to conduct telephone interviews. So we sent email and text invitations to our sample to complete the online survey. We used an existing email and cell phone contact frame that were matched to the Census Bureau's master address file, and we're able to use that file to email and text our invitations. And the contact frame file we had also ranked or prioritized, however you want to call it, the email addresses and the phone numbers to what seemed to be the best up to, I believe, 5 or 10 per address, and so that's how we were able to get in touch with everyone. Okay, so go to the next slide, please. I'm moving my mouse, but it's not doing anything. So this is our content for phase 1 and phase 2. We collected information on basic demographics, a series of employment questions, employment status, loss of employment income, and we added some additional questions about expenditures, commuting and telework, as well as transportation. For food security, we asked about past and current food sufficiency, receipt of free meals, how much money spent on groceries and prepared foods, And then for phase 2, added an additional questions about SNAP benefit receipts. Our newer content component was about program use, and so we asked about Social Security programs as well as unemployment insurance. For health, we asked about overall health, mental health, and in phase 2, added questions about mental health service use, health insurance and access and delays in health care due to the pandemic. Housing questions, we asked tenure, whether or not you're renting or owning, renting or own, type of living quarters, the number of bedrooms in the housing units, status of rent and mortgage payments, and confidence about paying rent or mortgage the next month, and questions about eviction and foreclosure expectations. And then for education, we asked about the effects of the coronavirus on how children in grades K to 12 receive their education, access to computer and digital devices, and internet availability, time spent with teachers, and spent on educational activities and studying. And in phase 2, we added questions about post-secondary education. Next slide, please. For data collection, phase 1, as mentioned earlier, ran from April 23rd to July 21st with email and text invitations. This was a weekly data collection, ran from Thursday through Tuesday. We also released data weekly through our interactive data tool, static tables, and our PUF. The data were also available at the national, state level, and for the 15 largest metropolitan statistical areas. And we included a longitudinal sample where select sample was asked to complete the survey for 3 weeks. Some changes we made for phase 2, which again is running currently from August 19th to October 26th. We changed to a 2-week data collection, really 13 days from a Wednesday to Monday. And data released every 2 weeks instead of weekly. And we, because of the high attrition rate with our longitudinal sample, we decided not to include the longitudinal sample for phase 2. Okay, next slide, please. So these are our responses for phase 1 and phase 2 so far. As you see, we have like a lower response rate. It was expected. One, you guaranteed you're going to have a lower response rate when you don't have face-to-face interviews, but also this was experimental and, using a different kind of frame. For phase 2, our weighted response rate has increased to a little over 10%, and we attribute this primarily to the longer data collection period. Okay, next slide. So this is our interactive data tool. This is a snapshot from phase 1. Along the left side, as you click on each of the buttons along the left side, the map, the chart, and the graph, they all change based on which indicator you're looking at. And so we had 6 indicators in phase 1. Next slide. And this is a screenshot of what the phase 2 interactive tool looks like. We have a couple additional indicators along the left side, but still have the map. We changed what the graph looks like, and we still have the table down at the bottom that shows the United States and each state for each of the indicators. Next slide, please. So these are just some findings for the different indicators in the tool for Oregon and Washington. We did Oregon and Washington together. So for Oregon, so we can see here for expected loss in employment income, which measures the percentage of adults who expect someone in their household to have a loss in employment income in the next 4 weeks. For Oregon, that number is around 24.9%. Next slide. Next one is telework, and looks at the percentage of adults living in households where at least one adult has substituted some or all of their typical in-person work for telework because of the pandemic. And if you look down, Oregon is at 37.8%. Next slide. Looking at food scarcity, which is the percentage of adults in households where there was either sometimes or often not enough to eat in the last 7 days. And we have Oregon at 8.3%. So that's a lower percentage. So good. Next is housing insecurity. And that's the percentage of adults who are not current or on rent or mortgage payments, or who have slight or no confidence that their household can pay next month's rent or mortgage on time. And we have it at like 5.3% here. Next. In likelihood of eviction, or in foreclosure, percentage of adults living in households where eviction or foreclosure in the next 2 months is either very likely or somewhat likely, and falling around 41.8%. Next, we also looked at difficulty paying for usual household expenses, and those are percentage of adults living in households where it's been somewhat or very difficult to pay for usual household expenses during the coronavirus pandemic, and that's about 29.0%. And then finally, for the next slide, we have change in post-secondary education. So the percentage of adults in households where at least one adult was planning on taking post-secondary classes this fall, but for whom those plans have either been canceled or changed in some significant way due to the pandemic. And that's, that seems to be happening all around and across a number of states. So we're at 85.1% here. And then next slide. Can you go back one? Yep. So this is a look at employment income, loss in employment income in households for adults 18 and over by presence of children. And as you see, the darker line are those households with presence of children, and they have a higher percentage reporting loss in employment income as compared to households without children, which is the green line. Next slide. And similarly, this is a percentage of adults in households where someone lost employment income since March 13th. And this is just showing the same finding by the 15 metropolitan areas. Next slide. This is housing confidence, and we're looking at housing confidence by income. So on the left, we see low confidence in paying rent by income. So those with under $100,000 income report a higher amount of low confidence, or lower confidence, we should say, in paying their rent. And similarly, on the right, these are households where a mortgage is paid, and those with a lower income report lower confidence in being able to pay their mortgage. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that was put together by the National Center for Health Statistics, and they did a measure of symptoms of anxiety disorder, depressive disorder, or one or the other. And just looking and comparing the Pulse survey findings from the week of May 28th to June 2nd to similar questions asked in the National Health Interview Survey, which is one of their primary health surveys in the previous year, and just seeing the dramatic difference in reports of anxiety or depressive disorder during the Pulse survey versus the NHIS in the previous year. Next slide, please. And similarly, this is just anxiousness by presence of children, and so those households with children, the blue lines are reporting a little more anxiousness than those without. Next slide. And similarly with worry, we just see that households with children seem to be feeling the effects of the pandemic more than households without. Next slide. And similarly for food sufficiency, we do see current food sufficiency in households. So these are where they reported getting enough of the needed food prior to the March 13th by, okay, let me read this again. Current food sufficiency in households where adults 18 and over reporting getting enough of the needed food prior to March 13th by presence of children. So the blue is the reporting sometimes or often not enough food, not getting enough food in the last 7 days for those households with children. And the green is the same for those households without children. So again, households with children seem to be affected more by the pandemic. Next slide. And this is looking at education, those adults living with children in grades K to 12 who are using online resources for distance learning by the adult educational attainment. And you see that the percentage goes up with education level of the adults in the household with those children. Next slide. And mortgage or rent confidence in paying next month's rent or mortgage for adults by presence of children. So these numbers show the percent reporting moderate or high confidence in paying next month's rent or mortgage, and those households without children have higher confidence than those households with children. Next slide. And that's pretty much it. I just wanted to give you a snapshot of some of the data coming out of the survey, and these are all the various and sundry. The top website is the primary website to access the data, and these are, other pages you can access to get more info on the Household Pulse Survey. And I think that's it.
Thanks, Kathy. So we don't have any questions in chat yet, so if you do have any questions for Kathy, please go ahead and submit those. But I did want to ask, as I know I threw that out there yesterday, and again, just similar to Kathy, what are the plans for phase 3 and beyond?
Yeah, so we're currently, similar to Small Business Pulse, we're awaiting approval to continue with phase 3, which will look a lot like phase 2, just a continuation of it. And potentially, as we get approved requests for question additions, we may modify the questionnaire moving forward. But phase 3 will look like phase 2, but it's an extension of it if we're able to get OMB clearance, and that would start immediately after phase 2 completes. Or prayerfully, we could just continue right on with it and not have any gaps. But that's the plan. We're working with OMB to continue on with the survey.
Okay, great. And I don't see any other questions so far. So if before we let Kathy go, if anybody has anything they'd like to put in the chat real quick, please go ahead and do that. Okay, so we don't have anything else, but of course, if anybody does think of anything for Cassie or Kathy before we hang up today, you can go ahead and submit those in the chat, and we can make sure to pass them along to them.
And am I audible right now?
We can hear you, Charles.
Okay, good. Yeah, I wanted to reiterate what I mentioned at the beginning of today, that we will make sure to get the slide presentations from all the speakers and hopefully recordings as well. And it may take some time to put the closed captions on the recordings, but once we do, they'll be linked from our events page. From our homepage, you can navigate to State Data Center events, or just type events after the slash from our homepage. And down there in the schedule grid is where we will link the presentations and the recordings. So we have one more week. Many of you are signed up for the last session a week from today, which we'll hear about economic data and confidentiality protections implemented for the 2020 census. So thanks to everybody. Thanks, Barb, for running the show, and thanks to Cassandra and Kathy for the COVID Hub, and thanks to Heidi for monitoring the chat.